Judge Kavanaugh, it's my understanding that you have denied the allegations by Dr. Ford, Ms. Ramirez, and Ms. Swetnick. Is that correct?
Yes.
All three of these women have asked the FBI to investigate their claims. I listened carefully to what you said. Your concern is evident and clear. And if you're very confident of your position, and you appear to be, why aren't you also asking the FBI to investigate these claims? And the terrible and hard part of this is, when we get an allegation, we're not in a position to prove it or disprove it. Therefore, we have to depend on some outside authority for it. And it just seemed to me then, when these allegations came forward, that you would want the FBI to investigate those claims and clear it up once and for all. Well, the difficult thing is that these hearings are set and set by the majority, but I'm talking about getting the evidence and having the evidence looked at, and I don't understand. You know, we hear from the witnesses, but the FBI isn't interviewing them and isn't giving us any facts. So all we have.
Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Kavanaugh, earlier today, Dr. Christine Ford sat in that same chair, and under oath, she said clearly and unequivocally that she was the victim of sexual assault at your hands. She answered our questions directly, and she didn't flinch at the prospect of submitting herself to an FBI investigation of these charges. We know, and I'm sure she's been advised by her attorneys, that a person lying to the FBI can face criminal prosecution. You have clearly and unequivocally denied that you assaulted Dr. Ford. With that statement, you must believe that there is no credible evidence or any credible witness that could prove otherwise. You started off with an impassioned statement at the beginning, and I can imagine, try to imagine what you have been through or your family's been through, and I'm sure I wouldn't get close to it. It's an impassioned statement. And in the course of it, you said, I welcome any kind of investigation. I quote you. I welcome any kind of investigation. I've got a suggestion for you. Right now, turn to your left in the front row, to Don McGahn, counsel to President Donald Trump. Ask him to suspend this hearing and nomination process until the FBI completes its investigation of the charges made by Dr. Ford and others, and goes to bring the witnesses forward and provides that information to this hearing. I'm sure that the chairman at that point will understand that that is a reasonable request to finally put to rest these charges if they are false, or to prove them if they are not. You spent 2 years in the White House office that approved judicial nominees. You turn to the FBI over and over and over again for their work. Let's bring them in here and now. Turn to Don McGahn and tell him it's time to get this done. An FBI investigation is the only way to answer some of these questions. I'll just say this. If you, Judge Kavanaugh, turn to Don McGahn and to this committee and say, for the sake of my reputation, my family name, and to get to the bottom of the truth of this, I am not going to be an obstacle to an FBI investigation, I would hope that all the members of the committee would join me in saying we're going to abide by your wishes and we will have that investigation. And this morning I asked Dr. Ford, I asked her about this incident where she ran into Mark Judge at Safeway. And she said, sure, I remember, 6 or 8 weeks after this occurrence. Well, someone at the Washington Post went in and took a look at Mr. Judge's book and has been able to, the run that he wrote about his addiction and his alcoholism. And they have narrowed it down what they think was a period of time, 6 or 8 weeks after the event. And he would have been working at the Safeway at that point. So the point I'm getting to is we at least can connect some dots here and get some information. Why would you resist that kind of investigation? Why would you resist that kind of investigation?
Should we let things settle a little bit after that?
If you want to, we'll take a 60-second break.
No, I'm good.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm good. One of the reasons, Mr. Kavanaugh, that we are looking at the yearbook is that it is relatively consistent in time with the events at issue here. And because it appears to be your words, is it in fact your words on your yearbook page? Yeah, I'm actually interested. You know, lawyers should be working off of common terms and understand the words that we're using. I think that's a pretty basic principle among lawyers, wouldn't you agree?
Have at it, Senator.
Let's look at Beach Week Ralph Club biggest contributor. What does the word Ralph mean in that? So the vomiting that you reference in the Ralph Club reference related to the consumption of alcohol.
Senator, I was the top of my class academically, busted my butt in school, captain of the varsity basketball team, got into Yale College. When I got into Yale College, got into Yale Law School, worked my tail off.
And did the word Ralph you used in your yearbook
I
relate
already
to
answered the
alcohol?
question. If you're,
Did it relate to alcohol?
I like
You
beer.
haven't answered that.
I like beer. I don't know if you do.
Okay.
Do you like beer, Senator, or not? What do you like to drink?
Next one is,
Senator, what do you like to drink?
Judge, have you, I don't know if it's buffed or boofed. How do you pronounce that?
That
Judge?
refers to flatulence. We were 16.
Okay.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge, we're talking here about decency, and you understand we have this constitutional duty to advise and consent. And for me, when this evidence came forward, I decided that I needed to look at this, and I needed to find out about it, and I needed to ask you questions about it, as well as others that were involved. So again, I'm not going to take quite the same approach as my colleagues here and talk about Don McGahn or any of this. Why don't you just ask the president? Dr. Ford can't do this. We clearly haven't been able to do this. But just ask the president to reopen the FBI investigation.
I think the committee is doing, you're doing the investigation. I'm here to answer your questions.
No.
And I should say one thing, Senator Klobuchar, which is I appreciate our meeting together, and I appreciate how you handled the prior hearing, and I have a lot of respect for you.
Well, thank you. All of that aside, here's the thing. You could actually just get this open so that we can talk to these witnesses, and the FBI can do it instead of us. And you've come before us, but we have people like Mark Judge, who Dr. Ford says was a witness to this. We have this polygraph expert that my colleagues were raising issues about the polygraph. We would like to have that person come before us. And I just think if we could open this up.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I guess I am. But Mark Judge has provided sworn statements saying this didn't happen and that I never did or would do.
But we would like the FBI to be able to follow up and ask him questions. You know, we talked about past nomination processes, and you talked about those. And I note that President George Bush, in the Anita Hill Justice Thomas case, he opened up the FBI investigation and let questions being asked. And I think it was helpful for people. So was his decision reasonable?
I don't know the circumstances of that. What I know, Senators, I'm here.
But the circumstances are that he opened up the investigation so the FBI could ask some questions. That's what he opened up the background check.
I'm here to answer questions about my yearbook or about, what I,
Okay.
and my sports or,
Okay.
summer
I'm not
league
going to ask.
basketball.
Okay. I'm not going to ask about the yearbook. So most people have done some drinking in high school and college. And many people even struggle with alcoholism and binge drinking. My own dad struggled with alcoholism most of his life, and he got in trouble for it, and there were consequences. He is still in AA at age 90, and he's sober. And in his words, he was pursued by grace, and that's how he got through this. So in your case, you have said here and other places that you never drank so much that you didn't remember what happened. But yet, we have heard, not under oath, but we have heard your college roommate say that you did drink frequently, these are in news reports, that you would sometimes be belligerent. another classmate said, it's not credible for you to say you didn't have memory lapses. So drinking is one thing.
I actually don't think that's, the second quote's correct. On the first quote, if you wanted, I provided some material that's still redacted about the situation with the freshman year roommate. And I don't really want to repeat that in a public hearing, but just so you know, there were 3 people in a room, Dave White, Jamie Roach, and me, and it was a contentious situation where Jamie did not like Dave White at all. And, I mean, this...
Okay.
So Dave White came back from home one weekend, and Jamie Roach had moved all his furniture
Okay.
out into the courtyard.
Okay.
And so he walks in, and so that's your source on that. So there's some
So
old...
drinking is one thing.
And there's much more. Look at the redacted portion of what I said. I don't want to repeat
All
that
right.
in a public
I
hearing.
will.
but
I
there's
will. Could I just ask one more question?
redacted information about that.
Okay, drinking is one thing, but the concern is about truthfulness. And in your written testimony, you said sometimes you had too many drinks. Was there ever a time when you drank so much that you couldn't remember what happened or part of what happened the night before?
No, I remember what happened, and I think you've probably had beers, Senator, and so...
So you're saying there's never been a case where you drank so much that you didn't remember what happened the night before or part of what happened?
You're asking about, blackout. I don't know, have you?
Could you answer the question, Judge? That's not happened. Is that your answer?
Yeah, and I'm curious if you have.
I have no drinking problem, Judge.
Yeah, nor do I.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Kavanaugh, today's hearing is about Dr. Ford's serious allegations about sexual assault. You have unequivocally denied those claims, but we're here today to assess her credibility and yours. And in our previous vigorous exchanges in the previous confirmation hearing rounds, I found that your answers, at times vigorously defended, but at other times struck me as evasive or not credible on key issues. And it's against that backdrop that I'm seeking to assess your credibility today. You said in your opening that rule of law means taking allegations seriously, and I agree with that. It brings me no joy to question you on these topics today, but I do think they're serious, and I think they are worthy of our attention. So let me, if I can, return to a line of questioning my colleague was on before, which was about whether you've ever gotten aggressive while drinking or forgotten an evening after drinking.
Those are 2 different questions. I've already answered the second one as the first. I think the answer to that is basically no. I don't know really what you mean by that. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, the reason
I don't mean it that way, but no is the basic answer unless you're talking about something that I'm not aware of that you're going to ask about.
The reason I'm asking, we've had a very brief period of time to weigh outside evidence, and I'll join my colleagues in saying I wish we had more evidence in front of us today to weigh. Do you remember Liz Swisher, a college classmate of yours from Yale?
First, on your point about the outside evidence, all 4 witnesses.
Well, let me focus. I'm trying to get this question.
I know, but you made a point, and I just want to emphasize. All 4 witnesses who were allegedly at the event have said it didn't happen, including Dr. Ford's longtime friend, Ms. Kaiser,
Right.
who said
And if
she's
Mark
never...
Judge were in front of us today to question, we'd be able to assess his credibility.
But
Let me
he's-
just get through if I can, Your Honor.
but-
Liz Swisher is a college classmate. She's now a medical doctor. And I'm quoting from a recent interview she gave. She said, Brett Kavanaugh drank more than a lot of people. He'd end up slurring his words, stumbling. It's not credible for him to say he's had no memory lapses in the nights he drank to excess. I know because I drank with him. How should we assess that?
She then goes on, if you kept reading, and says she actually can't point to any specific instance like that.
The quote that jumped out at me was, Brett was a sloppy drunk, and I know because I drank with him. There's also,
I don't think
in a
that,
separate setting,
I do not think that's a fair characterization. And Chris Dudley's quoted in that article. And I would refer you to what Chris Dudley said. I spent more time with Chris Dudley in college than just about anyone. And I'd refer you to what he said.
In other reporting, as I'm sure you know, a college classmate described you as relatively shy, but said that when you drank, you could be aggressive or even belligerent. And your roommate, as I think you discussed with Senator Klobuchar, said you were frequently drunk.
Yeah,
Or
and that roommate, that was freshman year roommate.
Yes.
And there was contention between him and the third person. There were three of us in a small room. And you should look at what I said in the redacted portion of the transcript about him. And you should assess his credibility with that in mind.
Put yourself in our shoes for a moment, if you would, Judge, and I know that's asking a lot of you in this setting. But suppose you'd gone through a process to select someone for an incredibly important job and a position. You had a lot of qualified candidates, and as you're finishing the hiring process, you learn of a credible allegation that, if true, would be disqualifying. Wouldn't you either take a step back and conduct a thorough investigation or move to a different candidate? And why not agree to a one-week pause to allow the FBI to investigate all these allegations and allow you an opportunity a week from now to have the folks present in front of us for us to assess their credibility and for us to either clear your name or resolve these allegations by moving to a different nominee?
All four witnesses who were alleged to be at the event said it didn't happen, including Dr. Ford's longtime friend, Ms. Kaiser, who said that she didn't know me and that she does not recall ever being at a party with me, with or without Dr. Ford.
What I've struggled with, Judge Kavanaugh, is the absence of a fair, federal law enforcement-driven, nonpartisan process to question the various people who I think are critical to this. My concern, should you move forward, is what it will do to the credibility of the court and how that may well hang over your service. I understand your concern about this.
Senator, my
but I wish
reputation
you would
has
join
been-
us in calling for an FBI investigation for 1 week
when
to
you-
clear or confirm some of these allegations.
When you say a week delay, do you know how long the last 10 days have been for
They were
us?
probably an eternity. But in the Judge Thomas confirmation
us,
hearing,
every day-
it was a 4-day delay.
Every day, it's been a lifetime. And you know, yeah, and it's been investigated, and all four witnesses say it didn't happen. And they've said it under penalty of felony. And I've produced my calendars, which show, you know, a lot, that's important evidence. And you act like, I mean, the last 10 days, I asked for a hearing the day after the allegation.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Judge Kavanaugh. As a federal judge, you're aware of the jury instruction, falsus in unibus, falsus in omnibus, are you not? You're aware of that jury instruction?
Yeah, I am.
You know what it means?
You can translate it for me, Senator. You can do it better than I can.
False in one thing, false in everything, meaning in jury instructions that some of us as prosecutors have heard many times, is told a jury that they can disbelieve a witness if they find him to be false in one thing. So the core of why we're here today really is credibility. Let me talk.
The core of why we're here is an allegation for which the four witnesses present have all said it didn't happen.
Let me ask you about Renata Dolphin, who lives in Connecticut. She thought these yearbook statements were, quote, horrible, hurtful, and simply untrue, end quote, because Renata alumni clearly implied some boast of sexual conquest. And that's the reason that you apologized to her, correct?
That's false, speaking about the yearbook, and she said she and I never had any sexual interaction. So your question is false, and I've addressed that in the opening statement, and so your question is based on a false premise.
Well, calling someone an alumnus in that way
Well, implying what
was
you're
actually
implying
interpreted
about
by a number of your football friends at the time as boasting of sexual conquest. That's the reason that I'm bringing it up. And
yeah, no, it's false. You're
with-
implying that. Look what you're bringing up right now about her. Look what you're doing.
Chairman, I ask that
Don't
these
bring her
interruptions
name
not
up.
be subtracted from my time.
Yeah, ask your question and then let.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've made reference, Judge, to a sworn statement, I believe, by Mark Judge to the committee. Is that correct?
I made reference to what Mark Judge's lawyer sent to the committee.
Yeah, it's not a sworn statement, is it?
Under penalty of felony.
Well, it's a statement signed by his lawyer, Barbara Van Gelder. It is 6 cursory and conclusory sentences. Are you saying that that is a substitute for an investigation by the FBI or some interview by the FBI under oath? As a federal judge, you always want the best evidence, don't you?
Look at Ms. Kaiser's statement. She's Dr.
Let me
Ford's
move on
longtime
to
friend.
another topic. You've testified to this committee this morning, this afternoon, quote, "This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit, fueled with apparent pent-up anger about President Trump and the 2016 election, fear that has been unfairly stoked about my judicial record, revenge on behalf of the Clintons, and millions of dollars in money from outside left-wing opposition groups." Is it your testimony that the motivation of the courageous woman who sat where you did just a short time ago was revenge on behalf of a left-wing conspiracy or the Clintons? Let me ask you this. In a speech that you gave at Yale, you described, quote, falling out of the bus onto the front steps of the Yale Law School at 4:45 a.m.
I wasn't
then
describing me. I organized,
to-
Senator, let me finish here, please. I organized a third-year end-of-school party for 30 of my classmates to rent a bus to go to Fenway Park in Boston, which was about a 3-hour trip. Great night of friendship.
I apologize for interrupting, Judge, but I need to finish the quote before I ask you the question.
I wasn't
The quote
talking about me.
ends,
Okay, well.
The quote ends that you tried to, quote, piece things back together, end quote, to recall what happened that night. Meaning,
I know what happened.
well, you,
Judge, will you quickly answer your question, then I'm going to let him answer.
I know what happened that
I'll
night.
finish asking my question.
Please, go ahead, but do it quickly.
Doesn't that imply to you that you had to piece things back together? You had to ask others what happened that night?
No,
Okay, you take your time now and answer the question. Then, Senator.
Judge Kavanaugh, my colleagues on the other side are accusing the Democrats of some sort of political conspiracy, but that's because they want us to distract. They want to distract us from what happened here this morning. And what happened here this morning was that we heard from Dr. Christine Ford, who spoke to us with quiet, raw, emotional power about what happened to her. She said she was 100% certain that it was you who attacked her. And she explained how she came forward, how she struggled with her decision, how she wanted the president to know so that he could make a better choice. So when you and my colleagues on the other side accuse us of ambushing you with false charges, I think we all have to remember Dr. Ford's testimony and her courage. Let me go back to something you just said in your opening. You said you thought at your first hearing the Democrats were an embarrassment. We asked you a lot of questions in those days. And which of our questions do you think were an embarrassment? I asked you about dissents you had written as a judge, an amicus brief you wrote as a lawyer, and your knowledge of sexual harassment and abuse by your close friend and mentor, Alex Kozinski. All valid questions in this setting. They are valid because this is a job interview for one of the most important positions of trust in this country. And earlier you agreed that this process of advice and consent is really a job interview. Certainly not a criminal trial. There's certainly no entitlement for you to be confirmed to the Supreme Court. Are credibility, character, and candor of a nominee things for us to consider in your job interview?
I think my whole life is subject to consideration.
Is that yes? Credibility, character, and
My
candor.
whole
Are
life
those specific traits that would be of interest to us as we consider putting you for life on the highest court in the country? Credibility, character, and candor.
Of course, and as part of my whole life.
Is temperament also an important trait for us to consider?
For 12 years, everyone who's appeared before me on the D.C. Circuit has praised my judicial temperament. That's why I have the unanimous, well-qualified rating from the American Bar Association and all the people who've appeared before
So
you.
you would agree that temperament is also an important factor for
Yes, and
us to
like
consider?
the federal public defender who testified to the committee, the D.C.
So the
Circuit.
answer is yes. I am running out of time. You know, we only have 5 minutes, so let me get to something else. In your Fox News interview, you said that you, quote, always treated women with dignity and respect, end quote, and that in high school you never, quote, drank so much that you couldn't remember what happened the night before. Would you say the same thing about your college life?
Yes.
So I'd like to read you statements from people who knew you in college.
Sarah,
And
can I say
Senator
one thing?
Coons noted that James Roche said, your roommate, although Brett was normally reserved, he was a notably heavy drinker, even by the standards of the time, and he became aggressive and belligerent when he was drunk. So is your former college roommate lying?
Senator, you're asking about college. I got into Yale Law School. That's the #1 law school in the country. I had no connections there. I got there by busting my tail in
I feel
college.
insulted as a Georgetown graduate.
It's- Excuse me?
Go on.
I'm sorry. It's ranked #1. That doesn't mean it's #1. The first day I arrived on campus, we had captain's workouts. I played basketball every day, all through, and then as soon as the season was over in late February, captain's workouts started again. I was obsessed with
So
being the
you
best
were not.
basketball player.
I only have 23 seconds. So you were not as sloppy drunk, and so your roommate was lying. What
I
about
refer
Liz
you, I will
Busher?
refer you again to the redacted portion. You know, I worked very hard in college in my studies, and I also played basketball, I did sports, and I also
Okay,
did
wait.
socialize.
Excuse me, I know that the chairman is going to stop me, but I do have some other references from people who knew you, who say that you were not the
your
basic
time
choir
is
board.
up.
But, hold on, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, tell us.
I would like to, Mr. Chairman, okay, I'll wait until we finish, because I just want to enter some
Oh, you
letters
can-
into the
yes.
record. Could I do that?
I wasn't clear that's
It's not
what
a
you were
question.
doing.
I could go on. But, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record 4 letters. One is dated September 18th, 2018, to you from all of the Democrats on this committee. Another is a letter dated September 18th to Christopher Wray, the Director of the FBI, and Don McGahn, Counsel to the President, signed by all the Democrats on this committee. A September 21st letter signed by Chuck Schumer and Dianne Feinstein to the President, and a September 26th letter signed by all the Democrats on this committee, all requesting an FBI investigation, because you did say all we have to do is ask, and the implication being that if we ask, an investigation will happen, and it certainly has not happened. Thank you, Mr.
Without
Chairman.
objection, that will be included. Senator, tell us.
Judge Kavanaugh, you drank on weekdays as well in high school, not just weekends. Is that
On
correct?
weekdays,
Yes, sir.
I'd say that's rare. Are you talking about during the school year?
I'm talking about the calendars that you provided during these dates.
Oh,
and that
that's
summer.
in the summer after a football workout when we went over to,
You drank on weekdays, yes or no, sir?
in the summer, when we went over to Timmy's house on July 1st, that would indicate yes.
Yes, in other words, that July 1st reference to skis, went over for skis, that's brewskis, correct?
And after Tobin's,
Sir, I just need a yes or no. That brewskis, right?
well, I need to explain in context.
You just said, sir, that you drank on weekdays. That's all I was looking for.
Well, no,
If I may
that's,
ask,
you're-
if I may ask the next question, sir.
We're-
You said clearly on the record, I just want you to restate it, that you never in your life, after drinking heavily to the point of throwing up, and again, you said you had a weak stomach, you said you never had gaps in memories, never had any losses whatsoever, never had foggy recollection about what happened. Is that correct, sir? Yes or no?
that's what I said.
Okay. Sir, you also said that this past 2 weeks has been a 2-week effort calculated and orchestrated as a political hit. Are you saying that Dr. Ford's efforts to come forward, to prepare for the very difficult testimony she gave today, to travel to Washington, D.C. and tell us about her experience, have all been part of an orchestrated political hit? And are you basically calling her some kind of political operative?
By the actions of this committee, and it's turned this into
So,
a
sir,
circus.
let's just be clear. In other words, you have problems with the senators that are up here and how we conducted it, but you're not saying in any way that she is a political pawn, political operative. You have sympathy for her. She is talking about a sexual assault. Is that correct?
My family has no ill will toward her.
Thank you, sir. Do you wish that she never came forward?
Senator, I did not do this. The witness.
That's not my question, sir. Could you try to answer my question, sir? Do you wish she never came forward?
The witnesses who were there say it didn't happen.
Okay, sir. Do you wish she just remained silent then?
The witnesses who were there say it didn't happen. All allegations should be taken seriously.
So even if it's in the final days before a vote, if someone has a credible allegation of experience that they held for a long time, that person should be allowed to come forward. And in fact, as she said, it was her civic duty. You're not questioning her sense of civic duty, are you?
She did come forward, and then
I know you have a lot of political animus. You stated it very clearly towards my colleagues and I on this panel. What I'm trying to get to the bottom of is you do not see her specifically as part of an orchestrated event. She is not a political pawn.
I don't know her.
And I understand, but she came forward. She took a great extent.
Yeah.
Your family has gone through hell. Her family has gone through hell. She sat here. She told her truth. And you made the allegation that she was coordinating it. I do not think she was coordinating with the
I did
therapist.
not say that.
You said this, I'm sorry. So you said that others were making a coordinated attack.
Coordinated by.
Forgive me. You were talking about us, not her. So she
People
was
in this
not.
room coordinated.
She was not doing this for political efforts in 2012 when she talked to her therapist about this attack. She was not coordinating about this painful experience when she made revelations to her husband. She did not coordinate in 2013, 16, 2017, before you even nominated, when she revealed that it was you with 3 different people that had sexually assaulted her. That wasn't coordination.
With or without Dr.
And
Ford.
Ms. Kaiser has said clearly, and I'll quote what she said. She said she does not remember the night in question. That supports what you said. But she also says that she believes Dr. Ford. And so my colleague Lindsey Graham, who I respect and have admiration to and has been a partner of mine, he said voting no would be legitimizing the most despicable thing in American politics. Do you think that people who believe Dr. Ford are legitimizing despicable things? Those of us who think she's a credible witness, the allegations against her are credible, do you think that somehow we are engaging in something that's despicable? She was a credible, I'm going to finish my question, you can answer. She gave credible, meaningful testimony, a woman who had the courage to come forward and tell her truth, sir, and that's what I'm just asking you to say. She is not a political pawn. She is not orchestrating. She is not part of the Clintons' efforts to get some kind of revenge. She is a woman who came here with corroborating evidence to tell her truth.
Is that a question?
No, sir, it was a final statement.
Mr. Chairman, let me be clear. I did not hide Dr. Ford's allegations. I did not leak her story. She asked me to hold it confidential, and I kept it confidential as she asked. She apparently was stalked by the press, felt that what happened, she was forced to come forward, and her greatest fear was realized. She's been harassed, she's had death threats, and she's had to flee her home. In addition, the investigation that the Republican majority is heralding is really nothing that I know about, other than a partisan practice. Normally, all the witnesses would be interviewed. However, that's not happened. While the majority has reached out to several people, they did not notify me or my staff that they were doing this. And so to argue that we would not participate, but not tell us what they were up to, is somewhat disingenuous. I was given some information by a woman who was very much afraid, who asked that it be held confidential, and I held it confidential until she decided that she would come forward.
Mr. Chairman, would the ranking member answer a question, please?
If I can.
I have great respect for Senator Feinstein. We've worked together on many topics, and I believe what you just said.
Can you tell us that your staff did not leak it?
Oh, I don't believe my staff would leak it. I have not asked that question directly, but I do not believe
Do you know
they
that?
would.
I mean, how in the world could that get in the hands of the press?
The answer
unless the
is
people-
no. The staff
Have you
said they
asked
did not.
have you asked your staff or other
I
staff
just
members
did.
of the Judiciary Committee?
Pardon me? Well, Jennifer reminds me I've asked her before about it,
Well,
and that's true.
Well, somebody leaked it if it wasn't you.
Well, it was, I'm telling you, it was not, I did not. I mean, I was asked to keep it confidential, and I'm criticized for that, too.
Senator Harris.
Thank you. Judge Kavanaugh, have you taken a professionally administered polygraph test as it relates to this issue?
No, I'll do whatever the committee wants. Of course, those are not admissible in federal court, but I'll do whatever the committee wants. They're not admissible in federal court because they're
Thank
not
you.
reliable,
Thank you.
as you know.
So you've not taken one?
Right.
All three of the women who have made sworn allegations against you have called for an independent FBI investigation into the claims. You've been asked during the course of this hearing by 4 different members, by my count, at least 8 times today, and also earlier this week on national television, whether you would call for the White House to authorize an FBI investigation. Each time you have declined to do so. Now, you know, I know you do, that the FBI is an agency of men and women who are sworn and trained law enforcement, who, in the course of conducting background investigations on nominees for the Supreme Court of the United States and others, are charged with conducting those background investigations because they are sworn law enforcement and they have the expertise and the ability and the history of doing that. So I'm going to ask you one last time. Are you willing to ask the White House to authorize the FBI to investigate the claims that have been made against you?
Well, I'll do whatever the committee wants, of
So,
course.
and I've heard you say that, but
The witness
I've not heard you answer a very specific question that's been asked, which is, are you willing to ask the White House to conduct an investigation by the FBI to get to whatever you believe is the bottom of the allegations that have been levied against you?
The FBI would gather witness statements. You have
Sir,
the witness statements. They
I
don't
don't want to debate with you how they do their business. I'm just asking, are you willing to ask the White House to conduct such an investigation? Because as you are aware, the FBI did conduct a background investigation into you
Yes,
before we were aware of these most recent allegations. So are you willing to ask the White House to do that? And say yes or no, and then we can move on.
I've had 6 background investigations over 26 years.
Sir, as it relates to the recent allegations, are you willing to have them do it?
The witness testimony is before you. No witness who was there supports that I was there.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a no, and we can move on. You have said in your opening statement, you characterized these allegations as a conspiracy directed against you. I'll point out to you that Justice now, Neil Gorsuch, was nominated by this president. He was considered by this body just last year. I did a rough kind of analysis of similarities. You both attended Georgetown Prep. You both attended very prestigious law schools. You both clerked for Justice Kennedy. You were both circuit judges. You were both nominated to the Supreme Court. You were both questioned about your record. The only difference is that you have been accused of sexual assault. How do you reconcile your statement about a conspiracy against you with the treatment of someone who was before this body not very long ago? Okay. And then, do you agree that it is possible for men to both be friends with some women and treat other women badly?
Of course, but the point I've been emphasizing, and that is if you go back to age 14 for me, you will find people, and not just people, lots of people who I've been friends with, some of whom are in this room today, starting at age 14, women. I have sent more women law clerks to the Supreme Court than any other federal judge in the country.
I only have a few seconds left, and I'll just ask you a direct question. Did you watch Dr. Ford's testimony?
I did not. I plan
Thank you.
to. I plan
Thank
to.
you.
I plan to, but I did not So I was preparing mine.